Well, full disclosure, Julian Assange is a personal friend of mine. And when I could no longer go into the embassy to see him, I stood outside and sang Frank Sinatra songs to him through the window. I'm actually not a bad singer. And Julian likes Frank Sinatra. Julian Assange is a world historic figure, whatever happens in this court case. He has developed an entirely new model of journalism, one which facilitates the exposure of material and information that the powerful don't want to see disclosed. And that is the very definition of journalism. If nobody doesn't want you to say what you're saying and doing, then what you're saying and doing probably isn't worth a row of beans, because if it's not hurting someone somewhere amongst the powerful, what you are revealing, then it's probably not worth revealing. And so Julian, during the time that I have been his friend, has revealed some of the most sensational material ever, only some of which he's on trial for. He's essentially on trial now for revealing war crimes committed by the United States and others in the invasion and occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan, which, when I started out opposing it, was a deeply unpopular stance, mine. I could show you my scars. But you can now not find a sentient being in the land who any longer thinks that invading and occupying Iraq was a good idea. But Julian, during that period, when things were different, revealed big crimes, systemic crimes, in the war logs, which showed mass killing of civilians, of journalists, a totally cavalier attitude to wiping people out, whether they were men, women, or children, whether they were Reuters reporters, whether they were prisoners being forced to commit indecent acts upon each other in the Abu Ghraib prison and be photographed for the entertainment of the torturers afterwards, videotaped and so on. Julian broke all these stories. He also broke a lot of stories. This is why I'm a bit surprised that Donald Trump is pursuing him with the gusto that he is. I still live, by the way, in hope that Donald Trump will pardon him. He also revealed, although he's not on trial for this, the absolute venality of the Clinton crime gang and the so-called Democratic Party in the United States of America. And sure, that benefited Trump, but it benefited all of us to know that Hillary Clinton was a crook and that the Clinton crime family were up to their neck in all kinds of vice, venality, and corruption. We all needed to know that, not least because they were secular saints in Western society. Julian revealed many stories which cast these people in a new light, for which he now faces 175 years in a supermax prison in the United States. So this story is important and yet entirely ignored by the very liberal class of journalists and broadcasters that feasted on the dripping roast of his revelations. And so if you were going to ask me, who do I hate most in the whole world, I'd tell you The Guardian. The Guardian newspaper personifies everything that I hate in society. And one of the reasons is The Guardian feasted on Julian's stories, ran them over and over again on the front page of their newspaper, and have remained utterly silent while he's persecuted, prosecuted, and banished forever into the bowels of a supermax prison, even though that very process may one day be used against them. And could be. I mean, if Julian has committed an offense in publishing these stories, so have they in publishing these stories. Their editor could now be on trial. Maybe one day will be. And if we get to a situation where a country, it's America today, it could be Saudi Arabia tomorrow. Saudi Arabia could, for example, I was a good friend of Adnan Khashoggi, who was murdered by the Saudi dictatorship and literally cut into pieces and flushed into a drain. But when he was living here in London, and in fact he was living in Washington when that happened to him, the Saudis could have sought his extradition to Saudi Arabia. Now you might say it's fanciful that any British court would send someone to Saudi Arabia, but it's not that fanciful. If you could send someone to 175 years in a supermax in America, if the Saudis had said, we won't cut his head off, we'll only put him in prison for 175 years, they could have extradited Adnan Khashoggi. Might have been better than the end that he had. But it could happen to anybody. It could happen to you. It could happen to you. Your seditious output here, seditious to somebody,
that would make a lot of people very happy, George. I tell you.
It could well lead to some foreign power extraditing you and destroying you. Now, when this unequal extradition treaty was concluded, in secret, in summer, when the House was not sitting, by David Blunkett, Tony Blair's Home Secretary, you may say I'm a soothsayer. I personally raised with David Blunkett a notional, because I didn't know Julian at that time, a notional case whereby a journalist whistleblower could be extradited without just cause being needed to be shown, could be extradited to the United States under this extradition treaty. David Blunkett gave me a personal assurance that it was on the face of the bill that no one could be extradited for a political crime in his secret extradition treaty that was signed before we even knew it existed. How's that for parliamentary democracy? I was an MP at the time. For here, actually, this very street. And he said to me, he showed me the declaration on the face of the bill, on the face of the treaty, that this could not happen. My fear could never come to pass. But it has come to pass. And the get out is, well, he's not being extradited for a political crime. He's being extradited for, effectively, espionage, even though he's not a citizen of the United States and never set foot there, never committed any crime there. And so the promises, sic transit gloria, David Blunkett, where is he now? What were his promises worth? They were not worth the paper that they were written on. And so if you believe in freedom of speech, if you believe in journalism, if you believe in the right of the public to know what is being done in their name on their dollar, you need to be concerned about what's happening to Julian Assange. And lastly, you call me old-fashioned. I believed, still to some extent believe, that the last uncorrupted institution in Great Britain was the judiciary. I know the social caste from which they come. I know they're not elected and cannot be removed. But when I look at how all our institutions have failed, one after the other, the civil service, the media, even the police, they've all failed us, one after the other. I thought the one that was left was the judiciary. I always used to say, and my father before me actually, long before these institutions failed, I'd rather take my chances in front of a British judge than in front of a British politician or a British journalist or any of a British police officer and so on. And therefore, the abuse of process on view openly, if you care enough to look at it, in this case has been so gargantuan. I'll give you just one example because time is running. if I told you that you could be extradited, even though it is established fact that all of your meetings with your lawyers were filmed by the prosecuting authority in the United States or their agents, so they know all of what your defense is. I speak as one who was secretly filmed in the embassy. Having a P, talk, everything I said was filmed. I can live with that. But Julian's lawyers were secretly filmed, talking to him, preparing him, and he preparing them for his defense in a court case that might one day have to take place in London. You would say such a case would have to be thrown out. Even if it was a traffic offense, it would have to be thrown out. If the police were filming you and your discussions with your lawyers. But that happened. Nobody disputes that it happened. All the evidence has been laid in front of this court in London at the Old Bailey, the old lady of British justice. But it will not make a blind bit of difference. The fact that such an abuse of process, and I could give you 500 other abuses of process that have happened, has not made any impact on this case, means that we have to fear for the justice system in our own country itself. And we, not you, me, someone wholly British, were led to believe and did believe that British justice was really something, that it was justice, that that statue at top of the Old Bailey of the lady with the scales really was something. Turns out it wasn't. Turns out, it seems, unless in the appeal process this is overturned, that Julian is going to be sent to 175 years in prison for the crime of telling the truth.